Dear students, welcome to my classroom of modern Chinese history. Today I am going to give you some ideas on Chinese labor movement. This movement is important to understand the course of the growth and development of Chinese civilization. Who are these laborers? They are the backbone of the production force of any civilization. Here, if I would like to begin my discussion with the ideals of Karl Marx, then I must say, according to Marx, the society is divided into two sections, the have and the have-nots. The laborers, the working class people, they are the proletariats. They are chiefly responsible for the production force, and their labor is indispensable for the development of a civilization. So their contributions in the field of economy should be regarded as one of the assets if a country or a civilization would like to proceed further. On the other hand, their social and political involvements should be that much important for us in regard of our understanding of history as well as our understanding of the society. So with this note, I would like to begin my ideas or like what I feel about this Chinese labor movement. I mean to say my ideas on Chinese labor movement, where I will also be working on certain theories to understand their position in the society. The Chinese labor movement has evolved over time as the economy of China has rapidly developed. Prior to the economic reforms, Chinese citizens were only allowed to work where they originated from. Since 1978, the overwhelming majority of the labor force were either working at state-owned enterprises or as farm workers in the rural countryside. However, over time, China began to reform, and by the late 90s, many had moved from the countryside into the cities in hopes of higher paying jobs and more opportunities. The only connection between the countryside and the city soon became that there was a huge floating population connecting them. Independent unions are illegal in China, with only the All China Federation of Trade Unions, ACFTU, permitted to operate. China has been the largest exporter of goods in the world since 2009. Even in India, also we use many products from China, starting from the bulbs which we usually lit in the Diwali to the clothes and many more. Not only that, in 2013, China became the largest trading nation in the world. As China moved away from their planned economy and more towards a market economy, the government has brought on many reforms. Here I would like to ask a question to my students. In which year China became the largest trading nation in the world? 2017, option A; 2016, option B; 2009, option C; and option D is 2013. The correct answer is 2013. Now I would like to say something on market economy and planned economy. What is planned economy? Planned economy means where we are having a specific goal. As China is a communist country, the emphasis is always being given on scientific socialism or equal rights of privilege, and prerogatives to all. So they have planned the economy accordingly so that everyone should have equal opportunities and scope in the economy for growth and development. But when we are intending towards market economy, that means definitely we are giving emphasis more on profit. Then definitely equal distribution of wealth or equal accumulation of capital is not possible. Here we find the differences or the discrimination, which could be explained as the division between the have and the have-nots. If we are talking in terms of profit, then the bourgeois or the owners of the mills, they are getting more importance or privilege in terms of earning, and they are definitely exploiting the laborers or the working force. So market economy is definitely exploitative, and it's not like the planned economy, in my opinion, where we are following a specific agenda which is devoid of any kind of self-interest, rather talks for equal opportunity to all. The aim of this shift, that is from planned economy to market economy in economies, was to match the international standards set by the World Trade Organization and other economic entities. The ACFTU, that was established to protect the interests of national and local trade unions, failed to represent the workers, but instead failed to do so, leading to the 210 crackdowns. That means definitely people, they were not satisfied with the performance of the trade union which was controlling the interests or like the activities of the workers all over China. So from 2010 onwards, or to be very specific, from 2000 onwards, people started showing their grievance towards the government policy in regard of labor interest. However, these strikes were centered around foreign companies. That means people, they were more hostile to the foreign enterprises or companies rather than the national ventures. Here I would like to ask you one more question, and the question is, what is the full form of ACFTU? Option number 1 is All China Federation of Trade Unions. Option number 2 is All China Forum of Trade Unions. Option number 3 is All China Federation of Trading Unions. Option number 4 is All China Federation of Trade Union. The correct answer is, that means the full form of ACTFU is All China Federation of Trade Unions. Independent labor organizing and independent trade unions are banned in China, and workers do not have the legal right to strike. So the strikes which took place were illegal as per the Chinese constitution. The growing labor movement in China, as fragmented and repressed as it is, offers hope for workers everywhere as an example of organizing and protecting themselves against incredible odds. So the laborers started working or raising their voice for their demands and against the exploitations. The Chinese Communist Party began organizing in 1920 and held its first National Congress in 1921. The third phase of the Chinese labor movement from 1920 to 1927 was its most dramatic. The fledgling Chinese Communist Party came upon the scene just in time to organize and lead an amazing display of the political power of organized labor. So, if we would like to know the history of Chinese labor movement, then we need to know the growth of the Chinese Communist Party and how their ideology inspired or influenced the workers. Here we can refer the writings of Mao Zedong, how he inspired the working class people whom he thought they were indispensable for bringing or for ushering the revolution or the cultural revolution. For Mao Zedong to have the cultural revolution or any sort of the revolution in the world, it's very important to get the help or the support of the working class people. So for him, the working class people could be the catalyst for bringing any change or transformation in the Chinese society. That's why in his party, or when he was the president, he gave utmost importance for the holistic development of the Chinese workers along with the Chinese peasants, who used to be the major portion of the Chinese population or demography. So, the role of the Chinese Communist Party is very much significant to understand the formation or the germination of Chinese labor movement, and how they inspired the Chinese workers to think something which should be national and not like what the traditional KMT party was thinking, just to welcome the foreign investment and to continue with bourgeois identity. To make the economy more national, to make the economy more modernized, how Mao Zedong and the other leaders thought to upgrade the Chinese working class force is really commendable. So, here I would like to ask you the third question. That is, as I have already told you, that Chinese Communist Party helped to shape up the Chinese labor movement, and from 1920 onwards, it started like the waves. So, there were many waves or stages we have in this course of labor movement. But due to the paucity of time, we are not going to highlight all these movements, but definitely they made the history of Chinese working class people more dramatic and more eventful. So my question is that from when we can identify the third phase of labor movement started? My option number A would be 1925 to 1928. My option number B would be from 1923 to 1929. Option number C would be from 1920 to 1927. And the fourth option is 1921 to 1928. The correct answer is the third phase of Chinese labor movement started from 1920 and it lasted for 7 years. That means till 1927. The right answer is option C. Through coordinated strikes and boycotts centered in large foreign-owned enterprises in major treaty port cities and involving hundreds of thousands of workers and organized and class-conscious working class directly challenged capitalists, warlords, and the imperialist powers. If we would like to trace back the labor movement in China, then, as a result of their protest, they were identifying their enemies, who were the foreign entrepreneurs or the people who invested in China, who were welcomed by the KMT party. So here we find like the Chinese working force before independence, they fought against the traditional regime, they targeted the warlords and the imperialist powers, and also they were very much against, or they were hostile against the foreign investors. Chinese workers must fight constant violations of labor law by capitalist corporations that, even under a nominally socialist system, still seek maximum profits. Now I would like to discuss about a very interesting question. Is there a right to strike in China? The answer is, according to An Jianhua, International Secretary of the All China Federation of Trade Unions, China's 1954 constitution protected the right to strike, but this clause was removed when the economic reforms began. As it stands now, things are a bit grey legally. There is no provision for or against work stoppages, but carrying out a strike is not technically forbidden. But while workers are striking quite regularly across the country, and the ACFTU don't see the strike tactic as necessarily the smartest one, given the conditions of China's labor market. I quote, "In China, we don't believe a strike is an efficient way to protect the interests of the working class," unargued. At the global level, China is facing contradictions between the domestic working class and domestic capitalists. But domestic capitalists also compete with foreign capitalists. So, if there is a strike, it will be detrimental to both the workers and capitalists in China. So, it would definitely go against the national economic interest, what An wanted to portray. Referencing Karl Marx's writings on the reserve army of employed, An said, I quote, "China has a huge population, so striking will not help because they are plenty, and striking will not help because of people in labor to substitute. So if people will strike, then they will starve, and definitely they will die gradually." If we are trying to give emphasis on Marx's writing on the reserve army of unemployed. Marx wrote that capitalists rely on there being more workers than there are jobs in order to keep wages as low as possible through labor competition. That means we need to have workers to continue the show. Otherwise, the workers who are poor, who are out of this profit game, will starve and gradually die. Instead of strikes, the ACFTU prefers to resolve labor disputes through consultation, arbitration, or legal action. In China's legal system, the country's legislature and the judiciary can also formulate laws and instruct local governments in case of a strike. If workers choose to pursue a legal solution, they can go to court at the grassroots level with a civil case or through a court focused on labor issues. One situation involving workers demanding a shortened work schedule recently went to trial, and the court reportedly ruled in favor of the workers. So, the judiciary system is in favor of the workers. So, strike is not the solution. Legal aid is very much important in this regard, and the nation wants to help the workers. So, the entire system is flexible as per the understanding of the Chinese leaders and also the people who are very much active in the labor unions like AN. Generally, workers' rights are subsumed within the overall priority of economic development. That means we need to see whether we can fulfill their rights, or if we are depriving the workers, then how it is possible to give them some profits out of the share from the capitalists. That is necessary to keep the balance in the economic system. Being at the mercy of the global economy and transnational corporations, investment decisions means the country is in an objectively weaker position for the moment as it pursues development. We need to have certain compromises as well if we would like to maintain the market economy. And for certain compromises, sometimes the countries, they exploit the working class people as well. So here, how can we have certain tangible solutions? That is also one of the pivotal roles of the government to search for. Now I would like to discuss something on relationship between the unions and the Communist Party. That is one more important facet in this Chinese labor movement. After its founding in 1921, the Communist Party of China, CPC, made building the labor movement a top priority, leading to the establishment of China's trade unions and the ACFTU in 1925. I have already discussed about it. I tried to give my students some of the glimpses. The ACFTU played a key role during China's civil war in the fight to liberate the country from Japanese occupation and in establishing a socialist government in 1949. The first laws adopted by the new People's Republic of China were on marriage and trade unions, because Mao Zedong always gave emphasis on the growth and development of working force. On the growth and development of working force, they, as per Mao Zedong's opinion, they are essential for any kind of revolution or change in the society and also to continue the legacy. During the destructive cultural revolution of the 1960s and 70s, here opinions may vary. For some people, the cultural revolution was destructive, for some it was constructive. The ACFTU was dissolved. It was reconstituted with the inauguration of reforms by the party leadership under Deng Xiaoping in 1978. It's been engaged in an uphill battle ever since, as it charts out how to deal with transnational corporations moving into China. That means how to restrict the flow of the foreign invests where it is creating an unhealthy competition in the national market, especially for the national investors. Trade unions serve as a bridge as well as a bond between the people and the 86 million member of CPC, said An, I quote, "Unions are an institutional pillar of the political system and at same time are meant to serve the interests of the mass of people, especially the working class. So the working class in China constitutes the mass of the majority of their population. The relationship between ACFTU and CPC has caused trade union federations in some other countries to reject formal ties with the ACFTU. Because the CPC is the governing party, they insist China's labor movement is therefore not authentic or independent. Their stance reflects lingering influences of anti-communism, though, and doesn't recognize the role communists have played in China's labor movement throughout its history. Here we find a kind of contradiction or dichotomy, where we find communists, they played an important role before independence, while organizing the labor movements after independence, they are not that much functional. But before the independence or before 1949, Chinese Communist Party, they were very much vocal. I mean, the members were, or the leaders were very much vocal to help the workers to get their rights or to have their share in the profits. So this is something where we find a gap or something what can be considered a difference in the communist political agenda before and after of China's independence, or before and after of China's growth as a country where China is basically depended on communism. In China, the policy is to organize under one trade union federation. So they are not encouraging to have many trade unions. Trade union federations in some capitalist countries charge that this reflects restrictions on the freedom of the working class. That is somehow controlling the freedom of the working class people because they have to follow the order of a single union or organization. It's not like that there is a room for democracy or having the democratic opinions. Rather, it is perhaps very much arbitrary, or it's a reflection of autocracy or dictatorship. I mean, if China is having an intention to only have one trade union which could control or could work for the entire Chinese working class force. I would like to repeat here. In China, the policy is to organize under one trade union federation. Trade union federations in some capitalist countries charge that this reflects restrictions on the freedom of the working class. But ACFTU maintains that organizing under one federation is more efficient than organizing separately. This is certainly something most labor activists in the US would agree with. So they are following the line of the American working class people, but here we find that we are not following democracy as well, because it is something which can encourage to have fascist mentality or fascist mindset if we are giving importance to the orders or the instructions of any single organization. Then the point is how we can define relationship with the global and US labor movement, where we can situate Chinese labor movement. The ACFTU is a member of the International Labour Organization, ILO, governing board and has friendly relations with 400 counterparts around the world. On said, the ACFTU enjoys a high level of communication and exchange with the US labor movement, which included a visit by AFL CIO President Richard Trumka in 2013, the first time such a visit had occurred. The communists, they have an ideology which is against of capitalist interests. That's why during the time of Cold War, we have seen how Russia objected in regard of the policies taken by US. But in China, what we can witness that in regard of labor movement, they always have a cordiality with the US working class people. So here we find how communism has got a shift or transformation in China based on its national needs. ACFTU solidarity unfolds in a highly globalized and independent world where transnational corporations are constantly in search of low-wage zones. ACFTU insists Chinese workers are not to blame for the flight of capital from the US. Rather, blame lies with corporate greed and US governmental policies that encourage offshoring of jobs and refuse to invest in modern infrastructure or develop domestic manufacturing. So, though they are having a cordial relationship with the US working class people, but with the companies, they are not. I'm talking about the Chinese working class people and their communication with the US firms or the US companies. As wages of China's workers rise and the country pursues stricter enforcement of workplace health and safety and environmental protections, transnational corporations are leaving. Because these transnational corporations, they only think about their own profit at the cost of the Chinese people's lives, who are poor, and though they are the mass, but they are marginalized in terms of their economic prosperity. But when the Chinese government is taking more stricter rules to protect or save the lives of the people or to maintain the workplace environment in such a manner which could be, safer and healthier, that is definitely making these transnational companies skeptical to earn profits unchallengedly or without any restriction. That's why they are now shifting their attention to the other countries. They are taking their operations to developing countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and others in search of greater profits. It is no longer the case that China is the world's low-wage sweatshop. That means we usually had an idea that in China, the workers, they used to get low wage, but now it is changing. Labor costs are now only 4% cheaper than those in the US when productivity is factored in, according to Oxford Economics. So, now the Chinese working class people, they are getting higher wages, and it's not that much less than what the working class people in US they used to receive. The principles of the Chinese government's foreign policy are based on the slogan, building a community for a shared future. Globalization and interdependence are only going to increase, and the Chinese believes this call for raising the level of international cooperation on economic development. The development of global standards for wages, health, safety, and environmental protection, and to solve crises like climate change and poverty. No country can solve problems in isolation. The government says, and cooperation, including in trade, can be a win-win for all. In practice, this means working out trading partnerships and development projects that benefit all countries involved. I would like to end my lecture with the quotation by Li Lizan, who was the Vice President of All China Federation of Labor. He stated once, "The Chinese working class and the people under the leadership of the Communist Party of China have carried out long struggles for nearly 30 years. Throughout the four stages, the Great Revolution of 1925-27, the Agrarian Revolution of nearly 10 years, the 8 years anti-Japanese war, and the People's Liberation War from 1946 up to the present, unquote, we have passed along torturous and difficult paths and have employed and coordinated in different stages various extremely complex methods of struggle and forms of organization, legal and illegal, secret and open, and peaceful and armed struggle, guerrilla and regular warfare, so that now a nation-wide victory has been fully won, and the People's Republic of China, led by the working class and based on the People's Democratic Dictatorship, is established. So I hope my students, they have enjoyed the lecture and understood the course of the Chinese labor movement in the history of modern China. Thank you.